Hi, I'm Andrea Lilienfeld, owner and team leader of the K Grant Group with my home group out of Scottsdale, Arizona. I've been a realtor since 2014, and since that time, I have been very actively involved on several different social media platforms where I see over and over again questions, comments, discussions surrounding geo-farming or farming, geographic farming, whatever you want to call it. We hear all different terms as I'm going through those boards. And so I thought today it might be fun for us to actually talk about geo-farming, what it is, why would you do it, is it successful or not, how do you select your farm, some of the main areas that I hear on a regular basis. So let's start with, what is geo-farming? Geo-farming is when a realtor identifies a very specific area that they want to get known as the realtor, the expert realtor that everyone should call no matter what. So once you've decided that yes, geo-farming is the direction you want to go, the next question you need to have is, well, where do I want to farm? How do I make that selection? How many homes should I be farming? So let's break this down and look at, how did I personally look at it? How did my husband and I look at it when this happened? Well, the first thing you want to think about is, what is an area I already know? I know like the back of my hand. I can talk about what the school districts are, what the shopping's like, what the lifestyle's like. And the first place that makes sense to look at when you think about it that way is, where do you personally live? Now, the area you live in may not always be the best area to farm, but it's definitely where I would start looking at and analyzing. So the different things you want to look at as you narrow it down. The first thing is, what is the average price point of where you live? The reason you want to look at this is because in the end, you're going to be farming because you want a good ROI. You want to make money on your investment. So you need to know that the average price point is high enough that once you get your commission, you are making more money on that commission than what you've spent on obtaining that lead. The second thing you want to look at is turnover rate. You don't want to be farming an area that doesn't have turnover. So let's say, for an example, you live in a quaint community where people are born and they stay in their whole life. They buy their first home, they stay there their whole life. That probably isn't the best area to make a purchase or start geo-farming. But on the other side, let's say you live in an area where it seems every 2 to 3 years people turn over. They're moving on to their next move. That's a great area to start farming from the turnover rate, because that means more homes are going to be going on the market more regularly, which means the chances of you getting a listing is increased. It's a numbers game. The third thing you want to look at is what I call realtor saturation. Is there already a realtor that owns that area? Meaning, when you look at it, is one realtor doing 80% of the business? Or when you look at the last 12 months, does a different realtor work that area every single transaction? If there's a different realtor that's doing each transaction, that's great. It means it's not already saturated by a realtor, which means you can become that realtor. So those are the main factors I always recommend looking at. Again, don't get so tied up in analytics that all you look at is the saturation rate, the price point, and the turnover rate. It's also important that it's an area that you know. So let me share an example with you and why I say that. When my husband and I got into real estate back in 2014, the number one thing I told him as we made this move is, I am not going to be a realtor that builds my business off of door knocking or open houses or calling and begging my friends for business. So we needed to come up with a plan and a business plan of how were we going to get business? How were we going to build our real estate business if I wasn't willing to do those prospecting things? The first thing that we did is establish what our farm area would be. When we started, I'll admit, we made the mistake that we only looked at those analytical factors. All we looked at for our area is where has high price points, where has a high turnover rate, and where has a low realtor saturation rate. And we started farming. We started sending postcards out every single month to those homes. Well, what I found is I started getting listing appointments. It worked. That's what you're going for. But it's important to note, and as we all know as realtors, getting the listing appointment is only the first half of the equation. You don't make any money off of a listing appointment. As realtors, where we make money is getting the listing and ultimately selling the listing. So what I found is when I was obtaining those listing appointments that were in areas I was already familiar with, I had a high success rate. I got almost every one of those listings. But when I would get a listing appointment in an area of Arizona that I wasn't so familiar with, that the lifestyle was a little different than I was familiar with, I didn't get the listing. Not because geo-farming didn't work. Geo-farming worked. I got the listing appointment. That's what geo-farming is all about, getting the listing appointment. But I didn't get the listing because I couldn't speak their language. I couldn't speak their lifestyle. I couldn't speak knowledgeably about that area. So when selecting your farm, it's very important you make sure those 4 factors and all 4 are taken into consideration so you can make sure that you get the ROI you're looking for with your geo-farming and with your mail pieces. So as you hear me talking about this, you may wonder, so why do so many people say geo-farming doesn't work? It's because they don't follow the process. Geo-farming 100% works if you follow the process. And that process needs to entail the following. The first thing is you need to identify the area you're going to geo-farm. The second thing is you need to set your list of who are you going to geo-farm and make sure that you've decided on a list size that's appropriate for your budget. And I don't mean appropriate for your budget for that month. I mean, you need to look at what can I comfortably spend on marketing pieces over the next 24 months. And I can comfortably send out a postcard every single month for the next 24 months. And you need to back into it budget-wise off of that. Because geo-farming isn't something that's always gonna get you a listing every time you send a postcard. Geo-farming is about building brand awareness, becoming the expert in an area. And you don't become an expert and you don't build that brand awareness overnight. What I personally found with our business is the phone really started ringing on month 9 of our mailers. Month 9. By month 10, I was getting a few more phone calls. Month 11, a few more. Month 12, my phone is now ringing every single time we send a mailer out. Then when do those listings come? Well, you start getting maybe one on month 9, one on 11. You start looking at months 13, 14, 15. Now we're consistently getting listings with each mailing we send. But if you haven't budgeted correctly and set your list size correctly to your budget, it's not gonna work. You can't mail once and think that's your golden ticket. You can't mail for 6 months and now you're out of budget and think, oh my gosh, geo-farming doesn't work. I can tell you personally from experience, you need to make sure you have your farm size set where your budget comfortably allows you to mail every single month for the next 12 to 24 months. Now, the one thing you probably heard me mention with that has to do with consistency. Consistency is so important with farming. When you're farming and when you're trying to build yourself as that expert realtor in an area, you have to be consistent. You want it to be to the point when you go to that listing appointment and you're sitting down with that potential seller across the table, that they have a stack of your postcards, because they do. I've seen it happen on several occasions. I've had people say to me before, oh my gosh, we had to go with you. You've been a realtor for years. You've been mailing us for years. We know the second week of every month, we're gonna get a market update from you. That's what you want. At the time I was hearing that, I was starting to hear that, and I'd only been a realtor for a year. And people were saying they knew I'd been a realtor for years because of my postcards. It wasn't because I was lying to them about how long I'd been a realtor. It's because I was the only realtor that was consistently in front of them every single month. So that's the second thing for you to keep in mind. What is your budget? Select a size farm that you know you're going to be able to farm. The third thing has to do with what I just touched on, consistency. Consistency in two ways. The first way is consistency of when are you going to send out your mailers? When are you going to send out your postcard? When are you going to send out a letter? When are you going to send out a brochure? All three are great options. In different forms of geo-farming, different forms of that direct to mail are going to impact and be impactful to different people. So it's good to have a variety of those pieces. So what do? Well, we send out a postcard with a market update every single month. Second week of the month, no matter what, no matter how busy we are, no matter what's going on, a postcard is going out to our farm. We send out a brochure every single time we get a listing in our farm. A brochure featuring the property of our new listing. When we put that property under contract that's in our farm, they're going to get a postcard under contract for that property. Then when that property closes, they're going to get another brochure that states, we just sold this property, here's the final sales price. And then in between there, if we have a buyer looking in that farm area, we're going to send out a buyer need letter to them. So in a month, there may be a part of our farm that's received 5 mail pieces. They've received that market update. Again, market update goes out the second week for us of every month. Consistency. What date are you sending it and what are you sending? Then every time we get a listing, they get a brochure. When it goes under contract, another postcard, and when it closes, another brochure. That's 3 mail pieces that those people just got about one property. We know it's about one property, but to the owner, we might as well have just sold 3, 4, 5 different homes. What they know is that proof of success, evidence of success, that's what these mailers in geo-farming are doing. It is showing our area that we're farming, that we're the expert in the area, we do a ton of business in the area, we're professional, and we're reliable. The next thing that's important to make sure geo-farming is successful, again, going back to consistency, what is your brand? What are you sending? I've seen realtors before on our team that struggle a little bit more with geo-farming. And when we go back and we look at what are they mailing, it's because their mail pieces are all different. They have a piece that's green because it's for St. Patty's Day. Then they have their blue one that's branded for K Grant. Then they may throw in a sports calendar in there. But none of them have the same colors, the same fonts, the same headshot of who the agent is. And so to a homeowner, that's like 3 different realtors have sent them pieces. It's important when you're looking at your brand consistency that the colors stay the same, your headshot stays the same, the font you're using stays the same, the overall look stays the same. Why is that? People ask me all the time on the team, Andrea, why should we keep everything so much the same? People are gonna stop looking at it. They're not. You might be bored with it, but the sellers aren't. You have to think, when you get direct mail like this, right, in your mailbox, what do? You get the mail, you look at it, you put it in the garbage. You get the mail, you look at it, you put it in the garbage. You get the mail, you look at it, you hold it, and you say, actually, I might need this. I'm considering selling. You set it aside on the counter. People are looking at your mailer for 5 seconds normally at a time. If your mailers don't look the exact same, if they don't look at it and say, oh my gosh, I've been seeing these for the last 6 months, I should call this realtor. Now it's just a shot in the dark if it's gonna work. But when they start holding yours because they saw you last month, sent something, and they're setting them aside because now they're thinking about it, now you have brand awareness. Now you're the expert in the area, and that's what we're looking for. So we have found that that's the #1 thing that's helped us. We do these 2 things with consistency to a level that it wasn't that long ago I was on a plane with my husband and the flight attendant pulled me aside and said, I know you. How do I know you? Like, I don't know. So we start going back and forth. What gym do you go to? What restaurants do you go to? Going back and forth, probably. She goes up and down again the aisle. She stops. I know you. And she doesn't look familiar to me. Trying to figure out. Finally, I say to her, where do you live? She tells me the area of town she lives in, and she was in my farm. She had been receiving my postcards for the last how many years, and to her, she knew me. I was a familiar face, a familiar entity, and we'd never met before. That tells me right there, geo-farming works, but it only works if you farm consistently with a consistent brand and a consistent message. And you need to have that plan in place when you start with your initial planning. So if you want to truly be successful and you want to make sure you get the ROI out of your geo-farming, which I know you can, the #1 thing I would do is set up a plan to ensure that no matter how busy you are, how many different transactions you're working, what's going on with your family, that you are going to get your mail piece out to your farm every single month. Like I said, we do personally a market update, but I have a full-time person on my team that helps with the office, helps with my marketing, that's able to make sure and take those individual market updates for me every month. If you don't have that, but you want to end up doing that, that's okay. What I would still recommend you do is come up with a plan. Set backup mailers of what is the ASV, that automatic seller valuation postcard that's gonna go out every month if you haven't placed your order by a certain date. If you have time that month to do a market update and get it out by your set date, awesome, get that out and say pause, you don't want the ASV that month. But make sure you have something set and you don't skip a month. The second you start skipping months and you're not consistent, that's when geo-farming doesn't work. If you stay consistent with it, with your brand, with your timeline of when you're sending them out, with your area, if you've done those steps of making sure you've selected the right farm area, geo-farming 100% will work. It's worked for years for tons of realtors. It's worked for me personally since 2014. We got into real estate in 2014 where I didn't have a sphere. Now I look at it, we're doing over $100 million in sales every year. And the #1 way we get listings is through our farming by selecting that geographical area that we know meets all the different factors that we can speak to. I mean, I could talk all day long about every area we farm. I know everything about it. It is successful. It's helped us build the business that we have. It's brought our team to a point that we're doing over $100 million in sales every year. And that's the #1 way we get our listings. So once you've decided that geo farming is going to be one of your main marketing pillars that you're putting into place for your real estate company, your next year's goals, a lot of people think, oh my gosh, but where do I start with this? What service do I use? How do I come up with what my brand is, what my templates are, what the consistency is? My #1 recommendation to you would be to go to wisepelican.com. Wise Pelican is the service that the K Grant Group uses that has helped us really take our farming and our direct mail pieces to the next level. They have pre-made templates already for you that go over postcards. They have the pre-made templates for letters. They have pre-made templates already for brochures. If you don't want something pre-made because you already have your brand and you want to make sure your mail pieces go with your brand, they have an option for you to work with a designer and have personal templates created that only you or you and your team would have access to. And they will let you do mailings at any size. So we talked about budget. If your budget is only to mail 50 postcards to your 50 closest neighbors every month, that's okay. If your budget is to mail 10,000 postcards, that's great, that's okay. They literally have the same consistent pricing, whether you want to send 1 postcard a month, you want to send 10,000 postcards a month. They have the templates created. They have a list builder there for you so you can play with the different criteria saying, I only want absentee owners in this zip code that their home's worth this. And it will populate for you what is the turnover rate. They can help you figure out those analytics. And if you decide you want to put in place that consistent 12-month plan where you know that mailer is going to go out every month, they have a full sales team that can help you with that. So if you're looking at getting into geo farming, if you're looking into starting this process, don't think you have to do it alone. I didn't do it alone, I can tell you that. Go to wisepelican.com and they can help you with it from start to finish to help set you up for success.